Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, a brief introduction. I'm Martin Kahl. For those of you who were here yesterday, you'll have heard I'm a writer and researcher in the automotive industry. I have 20 plus years experience in automotive, and I'm a consultant now and also host of a podcast, as you can see on there. However, you may have seen in the news that not only has the European Parliament recently voted in favour of a ban on combustion engine car and van sales by 2035, last night the EU Council decided on 100% CO2 reduction for car and vans by 2035. So it's not true that Europe has no battery production. Currently, most batteries, however, are produced in Asia. There are 2 plants in Europe operated by Asian companies. But in order to meet those 2035 targets, which have yet to become law, Europe needs to steeply increase its battery production. And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by Yann Vincent of ACC. Yann, would you like to introduce yourself? And then please tell us what ACC is.
Okay, good morning to all of you. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ACC. Basically, I'm a car guy. I've spent most of my career, the last 40 years, working for Renault, Nissan, and Stellantis. ACC was created 2 years ago, in August 2020, with a very simple objective, which is to build a European champion for engineering and manufacturing batteries in Europe. This objective is simply the translation of something which is very well understood by the European leaders as well as by the European car manufacturers, which is that indeed so far all the supply of batteries is coming from Asia, China, Korea, Japan, and it has been perceived as a major threat. Because let's think a bit about battery does account for roughly 40% of the cost of the vehicle. Can we imagine that for those 40% of the cost of the vehicle, of the EV, we rely 100% on a supply from China and Korea? It can't be. So that's the reason why ACC was created. Initially, we had 2 shareholders, Total Saft on one hand, Stellantis on the other hand. Since few months, we've been joined by Mercedes. So nowadays, we have 3 equivalent shareholders, Mercedes, Stellantis, and Total Saft. And the mere fact that 2 or 4 shareholders are 2 very important car manufacturers does highlight the fact that they believe that we need a European battery manufacturing, and that's the essence of our project.
How quickly can you get a factory up and running? You're talking about 2 factories, currently one in Germany, one in France, and another coming in Italy, right?
Yeah, so our plan is to have eventually 120 gigawatt hours industrial capacity in 2030. And those 120 gigawatt hours will be split into 3 equivalent factories, one in France, north of France. So we've started to build the first gigafactory beginning of this year, and we will start the operation in this first factory end of 2023. And then the next 2 are Kaiserslautern in Germany and Termoli in Italy.
Tell us a bit about the difference between producing batteries and producing engines. Are there any parallels? Are there any major differences? But does an EV battery factory specialize in, let's say, high performance, low volumes, or mainstream and high volumes? Or can one factory produce any kind of battery?
Well, obviously we are reaping some economies of scales when reducing the diversity. So basically, we consider that we can afford in a single block having 2 very different chemistries. So let's say, one high-cost chemistry, one low-cost chemistry, to be very simple. And from a mechanical point of view, from a cell dimensions point of view, we are better off having only one cell dimensions. But clearly our mechanical process is designed a way it can accommodate different size of cells. But the less diversity, the better off we are. And clearly, it's a process which has nothing to do with the engine process. Nothing to do. It's completely different.
As somebody who leads a battery manufacturing company, talk to us not just about your company, but what are the challenges that face any battery maker in terms of raw material supplies, in terms of access to machinery, and all of the challenges that might be common to any manufacturer?
Well, let's say that the biggest challenge we are facing, that's true for ACC, I guess it's true for the other European projects, is the fact that we are starting now, whereas our Asian competitors have started 15 years ago or 20 years ago, triggered by the willingness of China to move to EV rather than to catch up on ICE, because they were observing that they were lagging behind in terms of performance. And thanks to the decision of the Chinese authorities, the ecosystem around the batteries has been built. So that's the major challenge, I would say, relying on the skills we have in Europe, engineers, university, companies such as Saft, but not only, to catch up very, very, very quickly. The second point is clearly, and you did mention it, the access to the raw materials. The lithium demand compared to today is going to be multiplied by something like 6 between now and 2030. Nickel demand will grow by 30%. So why those difference? Simply because lithium growth is fueled mostly by the automotive industry, by the batteries, whereas the nickel industry is fueled by other clients than the automotive clients. So it's a major challenge because it does imply new mines, and that's the reason why I guess you've seen that there are initiatives such as the one of Vulcan in Germany, geothermal extraction of lithium in Rhine. There are similar projects in Alsace in France. There are similar projects in Serbia, I guess. So there is a need for investing in new projects. Beyond, I would say that the major risk on the raw materials is on the cost side. Because if the supply of those raw materials is behind the demand, it's clear that the prices are going to go up, and they've already started to go up. There is
not just go up; they've gone from 4,000
yeah.
to 80,000 since January, right?
Yeah. So partly it's speculation. So I guess it will go down some extent in the next few months. But it won't come back to the initial numbers, and it's clearly a major challenge, because for the time being, still the cost of an electrified car is significantly higher than the cost of an ICE, and if this gap remains, or even worse, gets bigger, it will challenge the demand from the end customers. So that's an issue. And finally, the last one you did mention, the last challenge you did mention, is the challenge of the pieces of equipment. As I've said previously, the ecosystem has been built in China. All the pieces of equipment for a battery manufacturer in Europe are coming from Asia. In our case, 30% from Korea, 70% from China. And for the time being, there is no European supplier of the pieces of equipment. The potential suppliers of pieces of equipment are lagging behind still in Europe. And it's clear that when you look at the number of projects we have in Europe, but as well the number of projects you have in Asia or North America, if all those projects are turning to the same Korean and Chinese suppliers for their own supplies, we'll have a bottleneck. We'll have an obvious bottleneck. So it's a challenge, that's all.
Why is Europe so far behind, and what can Europe do? What do you need? Is it money? Is it?
Well, I guess I know very well the automotive industry, and till 2018, inside the automotive manufacturers, apart maybe from Renault Nissan, all the other ones were believing that, and even Renault Nissan was forecasting 10% of the market being EV. All the other ones, they were thinking, well, we need having in our portfolio a number of EV cars, but we're not forecasting to have 100% of our registrations to be EV. Nowadays, you've heard Stellantis, from 2030 on, they will register only EV cars. Same thing for Mercedes. Each car manufacturer is turning to 100% EV. Why? Because of the regulation on CO2, which was made in 2018. And since then, the OEM have realized that there is no more hope for the ICE. It's a decision from the European community. It's a decision from the political leaders. We can have a piece of advice, but it's a decision which has been made. And I guess that the consequences in terms of potential markets have not yet been realized by the suppliers' equipment. That's my view. And obviously, we are discussing with them to convince that there is a market for them, provided they enter it.
So from COVID to chip crisis to geopolitics and war now in the Ukraine, there's a growing attractiveness for local. Do you expect to benefit from what you might call battery nationalism, and to benefit greatly from that, European manufacturers turning to you in order to source their batteries? Or do you still feel that there's a long way for European manufacturers to go, given that they're in existing contracts with Asian suppliers?
Well, I mean, it's clear that our customers and ourselves, it's the same thing, are more and more demanding on the CO2 footprint, ESG for our supply. It is obvious that EV are zero emission cars, and would be stupid to spoil this incredible advantage by a production from mine till our manufacturing sites, which will be highly CO2 emitting. Hence, the question of localization of the supply in Europe is indeed paramount. And there are some projects. There are already some chemical companies which are operating in Europe, namely Umicore and BASF. But there are additional projects. That's one. Second, the question of green electricity is obviously paramount. We are asking all suppliers. We are ourselves planning to utilize 100% of green electricity. There is still a debate on the fact that nuclear might be green or not, and it's a clear debate between France and Germany. But we are asking our suppliers to move to green energy, and it's clear that in that respect, it might be an asset for Europe. Mm-hmm. It might, and finally, the mere fact that we avoid long-distance shipments is a way as well to reduce the CO2. Last point, ESG consideration becomes more and more important. We are committed to vis-à-vis our customers on a full traceability of our supply chain from the mines till our factories, to guarantee them that there is no cobalt from artisanal mines in Congo where children are working. There is no nickel from mines with deep sea staining, etc., etc.
One of the key concerns with battery electric vehicles is not just what you've talked about, the long supply chain that might have a murky tail end right through to the point of use where it's a question of whether the electricity used to charge the vehicle is clean or not, but also what happens after that battery is depleted to 85% and becomes either second life or recyclable. What are you doing to ensure that when it's no longer usable in an electric vehicle, it can be recycled, it can be put into second life applications?
Well, clearly, whereas recycling is the duty of the car manufacturers, we are very much concerned with that. Obviously, for a different set of reasons beyond the ethical reason. First reason is that when we say that at some point of time the raw materials might get very scarce, the recycling activity might be equivalent to a new mine.
Right.
So from that perspective, it's obviously very interesting for us. We are shooting for 95% minimum of ore materials to be recyclable. So we are designing a way it will allow the people in charge of recycling to achieve such a number. Then the question of what could be the usage of a battery at its end of automotive life cycle, around 10 years. It may be used for storage of energy. It's a possibility. But the companies operating energy storage will have a question to ask themselves: am I better off getting an old battery or buying a new one? And it boils down to the learning curve or the improvement curve we have during the next 10 years. We are all announcing significant savings thanks to the technology, provided those savings are indeed achieved. I mean, am I better off buying a new battery whose cost is, let's say, $50 per kilowatt hour, instead of an old one whose initial cost was $100 per kilowatt hour? I don't know. But that's clearly the question which the companies in charge of storage of energy will ask themselves. So it is feasible. It's clear that, and that's going to be my last point, the question of usage of battery at the end of their automotive life is obviously beyond the laws. It's a key question for the car manufacturers because it has an impact on the residual value and hence on the leasing, etc., etc.
We're almost out of time, but I'd just like to find out from you how you plan long-term in an industry that's still very nascent, there's still the battery technologies relatively immature, and there are new technologies coming along. At the same time, we've got massive increasing demand. So you've got to build factories to fulfill that demand, at the same time be flexible enough to, let's say, accommodate solid-state battery technology. How do you do that?
I mean, our view, this industry is highly capital intensive. And I mean, the idea that you might write off an asset 4 or 5 years after having invested it because the technology has completely changed is an illusion. It won't happen. Our belief is that once solid-state battery will be on the market, the share of solid-state battery will regularly increase, but the gigafactories which have been invested with a liquid solution won't be changed overnight to accommodate to these new solid-state batteries. So we are planning our industrial roadmap based on our technological roadmap, and the plant we will build in 26 will be different from the one we are building currently.
Yann, Vincent, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.